Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Minol's World. I apologize, I've been away for the last 10 days. I just needed some time to sort of process what was happening in the world. We've seen what's happened in the US, and I think that made me reflect quite a lot on what happened in our own countries, in the UK, in India, and even around the world. I have so much to learn, so much to understand. We've seen the rage and anger that led these communities to protest in such a way, and I fully stand with them. You know, we're in a time where there's so much injustice happening in the world. It's a shame that it's taken a pandemic for us to see from a medical point of view, but also it's taken an innocent black man to die again in the US for people to fight for their rights. And I just read a couple of minutes ago that they say it's probably one of the biggest civil rights movements in history, with all the protests happening around the world after the death of George Floyd. I just hope everybody realizes that we're living in a very important time in this century, and this is something that will go down in our history books. Our kids will learn about it, our grandchildren will learn about it, and I just really hope everyone has taken the time to introspect and to understand the role they play in their society. I'll just give you an example. You know, when this pandemic hit, and I was worried about all the labor workers in India, and obviously there's only so much I can do living here in the UK, but one thing I did was I read a lot about the systems that caused them to suffer. I read about the systems that allowed them to be the ones who suffer first, and then those in power to suffer last. And that's all I can do right now, which is really educate myself, because with this education comes some power. And with that knowledge, you can actually work on creating some change, no matter in which part of the world you are. And now with my legal challenge with the government, I've had to spend so many late nights researching papers and understanding the whole history behind the system that we have in Britain. And you realize that the decisions that are being made now, the people running the country now, isn't what's causing the problems. Actually, it's just years and decades and centuries of power being placed in the wrong hands. And it almost feels like the system is built so that they win, and then we end up being the losers at the end of the day, because, well, we only have a certain amount of money as individuals. We only have a certain amount of time really to fight these people, and they know that. They know exactly what sort of resources we have, and that's been a big eye-opener for me, that we're fighting against a system. Whether you're in the US, you're in India, in the UK, or anywhere in the world, you're fighting against a system that's built so that they win. And I'm going to make sure that we break that chain of thought, and we try and show them that actually they won't always win. We have a voice, and we can speak up. And I really underestimated the voice of one woman, and I really underestimated the voice of even one community. And I'm really feeling so grateful that this has given me a time to reflect and read up on everything. And I really suggest that all listeners tuning in do the same thing. And the podcast today is not much. It hasn't got anything to do with the movements that we're seeing across the world, but what it does have to do with is representation in an industry, in an environment where we don't really see many South Asian women. And Armana is a runner, and she's done an incredible amount of work to represent South Asian women in this community, and she's achieved a lot of things that we talk about in the episode. And she understands the importance of being a brown woman in front of a magazine cover, or even on TV. She understands that role that she plays in inspiring other young women, and that responsibility as well. And I think that's a really important takeaway from this conversation, is that we all have a responsibility in some way or another, to lead the way and sort of blaze a trail for the people behind us. And I'm getting breathless just even doing this intro. This pregnancy is really getting to me now. But Armana is such a lovely lady. I had such a nice chat with her, because we talk about sacrifice, and then I got a whole new sort of dimension on sacrifice, and we speak about how the term sacrifice actually even diminishes what we're doing, because is it really sacrifice if it's something you love to do? Is it really a sacrifice to wake up at 6 a.m. and do your 5-mile run or your 10-mile run, if essentially that's what you need to do to achieve your goals? So we talk a lot about that, and I really hope you enjoy this episode, and I really hope it helps you get on a treadmill and run, because Armana talks about all the cultural barriers, all the other different types of barriers that women face in running, and she actually comes up with really practical solutions as well. So I hope it helps you if you're listening in, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to the show, Armana. It's so lovely to speak to you, but I really wish we could actually do this in person, because, well, we're in lockdown now, so this is the only way we can do it.
I know. Thank you for having me. It's a shame we can't meet in person, but we are on Zoom at the same time, so I guess that will have to do for now.
Yeah. So Armana, you will talk about it as we go along, but obviously you're a runner, and you've been training every day from what I mean. I wouldn't like to say I've been stalking you, but I've been following you on Instagram. I've been seeing what you've been up to. You've been training hard as well. How have you been finding the lockdown over the last few months?
Yeah, I've been training hard during lockdown. I think lockdown's been a bit of a funny period for everyone. I work full time as well, so I'm now working from home. So that's a big change. But in terms of my training, it's actually been super good for my training. Just as we went into lockdown, I decided to move coaches. So with no races planned, it's actually been the perfect opportunity to get to know a new coach and learn to work together. So that's been really positive. I think we all have a few extra hours in the day now. So I've been sleeping more and making more time for like foam rolling, stretching, all of those things that we never normally have time for. So lockdown has been challenging, but I think for my running, it's actually been really good.
So Armana, what do you do for work?
So I'm actually an accountant.
Okay.
Yeah, most people don't know this, but I'm actually an accountant. I specialise in tax, corporate tax. So I do that full time.
You're one of those people.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, I promise. So yeah, I work full time, and then I Instagram and all of that sorts of stuff on the side. So it's normally super busy, but it's fun.
So do you work in the city then?
So I used to work at Ernst & Young, and I now work for an events company. So a bit of a challenging time for an events company, but I'm actually based in West London, so not in busy central London, which is actually quite nice.
So Armana, when our Prime Minister announced lockdown, a lot of people worried about their jobs, job security and all that. Did you have the same concerns at that time, or?
Yeah, definitely. Especially working for an events company, obviously mass gatherings, people travel to our events. So it is obviously a difficult time. We've actually had a reduction in hours. So I work 20% less hours now as a result of COVID. So I think it's just, we just have to see what happens in the next few months. But I guess we're all in the same boat. So I try not to worry too much about it and focus on what I can control, because a lot of it is out of our control.
Yeah, but surely, I mean, I've spoken to lots of people on the podcast, and I mean, I would have said the same answer as you, like, we just have to have faith and keep going. But I have bad days too. And I think a lot of us have, where we're just like, when is this going to end? I want to meet my family. I want to meet my friends. I want to just have a bit of, like normality back into life. And have you felt any of that at all?
Yeah, definitely. There has been days where obviously everything that's going on becomes a bit overwhelming. But I do generally, even before COVID, just try and keep positive about a lot of things. And it has impacted my life for sure. But I try and focus, like I say, on the positives. I was meant to be buying a flat, but obviously as a result of COVID, I've pulled out of that. And rather than getting too upset about it, I've just thought, I'm sure it will bring new opportunities, hopefully when we come out of lockdown. So I think you have to try your best to keep positive about it.
And does running really help you sort of reframe everything in your head and have that perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I think running is like one of the only constants in life for me, I guess, because running's been there since I started running when I was about 11. So I've always ran, and it's always like kind of been there when I've been really happy and I can go out for a run and celebrate it. And equally, when I've had bad times in life, I can still go out for a run. And I think during the whole lockdown, it's been really great to still be able to go out for a run and focus just on that. And I always find running is that 1 hour a day or half an hour a day, whatever it is, where I kind of forget about everything else that's going on and just focus on doing something for me. And it's been nice during lockdown not to spend a little bit of time not worrying.
Yeah. Well, Armana, I was talking to my husband the other day, and we were just talking about a lot of, these successful people we look up to, and a lot of their stories are based on how they actually, it's all a mental battle, really, like waking up every day and getting everything done off your checklist. And one common thing that we found in all of them was that in one form or another, they meditate, and they actually find this deep connection within themselves that allows them to work at such a high, operate at such a high level. And I tell my husband that, I'm not very good at just sitting down in silence. I'm not very good at it. But pre-pregnancy, I was very good at, exercising. And for me, that was like my meditation. Do you feel like it gives you the same sort of outcome?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, it's so interesting that you say that, because I was reading something recently that said running is almost like meditating. You kind of go into that zone. And when I think about kind of what goes on in my mind when I'm running, I definitely think it's a form of meditation, because when you're meditating, you kind of zone out and you're quite calm and relaxed. And when I'm running, I do zone out and I just honestly switch off from the world. And it's when I'm calm. So I do think running for me is actually just a form of meditation. And there's been a lot of studies to say that running can be like a form of meditation. So yeah, it's really interesting what you say. I definitely agree.
Because obviously my quest now is to find out how I can operate at a high level. Because, what I'm trying to do with the podcast and everything else I do is sort of achieve something great that will help society or our communities in a certain way. But to do that, I have to be operating at a certain level. And I think when I used to run and when I play table tennis as well, one thing that helped me a lot was like just listening to my own breathing when I was running as well. And that really helped me. But there have been days, Armana, where I'm running and I just go into like a black hole of thoughts. And that's really difficult to get out of. But I've read a lot of studies as well about how running can be not a replacement, but an alternative to meditation as well. And I think a lot of people need to understand as well that, meditation means to focus your mind, and it can be done, I guess, in any way, whether it's running or sitting down in silence, something I'm not very good at.
I can't sit in silence either. But I do think you're right in that to operate at a high level, you do need to invest some time in yourself. And for me, I invest that time by going for a run and clearing my mind. I think it definitely helps me operate. And pre-lockdown, I used to always run in the morning. And I found that when I went to work, I was always super efficient at work because I'd been for that run. And actually Friday is always my rest day. Maybe I shouldn't say this, my boss might tell me off, but I would find I was always slightly less productive on a Friday because I hadn't been for that run. So I do think it's important to invest time to then get the rewards later.
Because you do have a lot going on, Armana. I mean, lockdown, no lockdown. You're running, you're competing, you're obviously working with on Instagram with lots of brands and everything, and you're trying to build your profile, and you work as an accountant as well. How do you deal with? It's funny, Armana, because I haven't even looked at my list of questions yet. I'm just like going straight in with all of these things that are coming to me as we speak. My question is that I'm sure there are days where you wake up in the morning and you're just like, I just can't. And I've had days, Armana, I'm not kidding, where I've had my running gear on, I've walked out the door, and then like 5 meters down the road, I've just turned around and come back home and said, nah, I can't do it today.
No, you need to remember that post-run high, and when you finish a run, you always feel great. And so when I don't want to run, especially in the morning, I hate getting out of bed. I just want to stay in bed and someone to bring me coffee in bed. But I always get out of bed because I think, okay, this is going to be a struggle for the next 15 minutes, but it's going to be so worth it. And I also find, obviously it's slightly different now because there's no races booked in, but previously when I had a race booked in, I would always wake up, not want to get out of bed, think about my goal, and then get out of bed. So yeah, some days are a struggle, but I always just try and keep motivated with the long-term goal.
So I started running when I was in Gibraltar. So, I used to, it sounds like a dream now. I mean, it seems so far from reality, but I used to run along the beach, along the Mediterranean Sea. And that was, I mean, who would
That is a dream.
Yeah, I know. I took it for granted when I used to do that. I used to run before school. I remember doing my A-levels. My mum would wake me up at 6. I'd do my 10K or, my long distance run and then go to school. And I'd want to do it because I knew that I would be going out to something where I was feeling the sun on my skin. I was smelling the ocean. And that was in itself very relaxing and very peaceful. And that helped me with my studies as well. It helped me quite a lot, actually. But then I moved to Prague in Czech Republic, and I went from like 20 degrees, 30 degrees to minus 15, minus 20. And that's when I realized that actually the motivation was so low, because running in the cold weather, for me at least, is just like absolutely horrible. And my brother is a triathlete, so he used to cycle. He did Ironman and everything. So he's dealt with the British weather as well. And in fact, he hated it so much, he ended up moving to California because he's like, I can't deal with this. So do you feel a difference in like your running mentality between summer and winter? Do you see these seasonal changes?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it actually really affects your mood. So last year I trained for the London Marathon, which was in April. So all of my training runs were done in the dark, basically, because it doesn't get light until about 7:30 in the morning. And then I also did New York, which was at the beginning of November. So all of my training runs in the morning were in the sunshine, in the light. Okay, it wasn't always sunny. It is the UK. But I found it a lot easier to train for New York running in the light. It was much nicer, for sure. But when I was training for London, my routes were a lot boring. I used to just run on the main road, kind of an out and back route in the morning, because it wasn't as safe to go down side roads. And I wanted to not go through any parks, obviously, when it's dark. So it is easier to train when there is nicer weather, especially if you're running next to a beach. That is the dream. But I think, again, it just comes down to motivation. And I think running and sports, it's not for everyone. And I think if running isn't for you, then you find what suits you. So it might be a HIIT workout or yoga, or whatever it is. But as long as you enjoy what you're doing and you're moving, you'll be motivated to get out and do it.
I think if you've experienced that high enough, you realize how important it actually is to get you going through the day. And I appreciate that a lot more now, Armana, because obviously my pregnancy, I'm very limited to what I can do now. And even for me, just going for a walk is like a success. I'm like, yes, I made it. I'm getting so heavy now. It's just like even going for a walk is a success in itself.
Oh, bless you.
So Armana, what's happened now in the last few months with your races? Because I'm sure like now it's running season, right? So what's been happening?
Lots has been happening. Lots has been cancelled. Yeah. So I was originally meant to do the Speed Project, which was scheduled for the 20th of March. And I was flying out to LA for that a couple of days before. And I was really excited for that. So for those that don't know what the Speed Project is, it's an unsanctioned relay that goes from Santa Monica Pier to the Las Vegas sign. It's roughly 500 kilometers, 360 miles. There's no route. you have a team. So we had a team of 6 girls that were going out. We were sponsored by Under Armour, and you basically get an RV van. We had 2 guys come in to drive the van, and you just run from point A to point B. It takes about a day and a half to 2 days. So you run through the night, through the desert heat. At night there's snakes, spiders, everything. And you end in the Las Vegas sign-in. Meant to have a big party in Vegas, but that was actually cancelled the week before. Unfortunately, as Corona developed, and then obviously we actually couldn't then enter the US on the dates that we were meant to be there anyway. So that was cancelled, which was obviously hugely disappointing, because that would be the first time that I've run over a marathon distance, because it averages at about 2 marathons over 2 days. But depends on what happens with the team. It's all very unknown. Then I had Berlin scheduled for September, and that was my big aim of the year. Berlin's a super flat course. It's a super fast course. So I really wanted to achieve my aim in Berlin, which was to run a sub 3-hour marathon. I currently, in New York, I ran 3:09 on a really hilly course. So Berlin was, the ultimate aim for me. And that's recently been cancelled as well. Because mass gatherings aren't happening in Germany until, at the moment, October, but who knows when. So
has it been rescheduled at all, or?
No, it's not been rescheduled yet, so don't really know what's happening with that. That's all up in the air. So yeah, lots has been going on.
I was just looking online actually, Armana, because you talk about the event in March that you had, right? And just last week, there's a documentary on Netflix called Losers. Have you heard of it? Have you watched it?
No, but I feel like I might like the sound of this.
You have to. So it's about, obviously, the title says Losers, but it talks about how people who have, athletes who have faced a struggle, how they've come out of it, essentially, right? And the very first episode is about an Italian runner. I was just trying to find his name over here, but I can't find it now. But an Italian runner, about 20 years ago, I don't know if this still exists, but there's a race in Morocco. It's like an ultra desert race that they have, and it runs for about a week or so. And he went there with his friend to run, and his wife was against it. His family didn't want him to go because he had a young family, but he still did it anyway. And he said, this is my passion. This is what I want to do. He went there with his other friend, who's also a runner. And in that race, in that course, there was a massive, a sand hurricane, which meant that as he was running, they had to stop and they had to find shelter, and they had to figure out how to carry on. So the sand hurricane actually meant that it destroyed all the points of the race course.
Oh.
So his friend actually continued to run, but he actually had to stay behind because he couldn't continue. And this meant that he continued running, but he ran in a completely wrong direction. So he's in
my God.
So he's in a Moroccan desert now. I'm sorry, I don't want to spoil it too much, but essentially, because I want you to watch this.
I'm going to watch this. I'm going to write the name down and watch it for sure.
Yeah. So he's in this Moroccan desert, and he doesn't have any clue of his bearings. He's running out of food. The matchsticks that he has to light a flare up was basically useless because it wasn't creating a fire big enough. And then he ends up, well, I'm not going to say what happens, but I was just thinking about that as you were talking about
this. To be continued.
To be continued. Yeah, I'll let you continue to watch it. I don't want to ruin it for you, but that kind of mentality that he had to just keep going. It's the kind of mentality that I think only, as I said, it's going back to what I was saying earlier about you have to tap at a certain level in your brain, to have that perseverance and motivation to keep going. And do you think that you've managed to develop that over time? How do you feel your mentality has changed over the last, few years you've been running, or however long?
I feel like I've grown up.
Yeah.
No, I think I've always had that kind of determination and mental toughness. And actually at university, my dissertation was on mental toughness and whether elite athletes have a higher level of mental toughness. I found that they basically did. And I think it's that mental toughness that makes you kind of persevere and go through that. And I think when, for example, when I ran a marathon, the last 6 miles of a marathon are unknown, your body hurts, and actually it is just a mind game. It's just one foot in front of the other, and you kind of almost have to trick your mind into getting to the end. And so I think I have always had that mental toughness and mental strength, but I think the more things that you go through, the more mentally tough you also become. So the more marathons you run, the more you push yourself, the more you actually think, actually, I am capable of more. And then you just keep pushing yourself. And it's about testing the limits, really. You want to see how fast you can go, how fast you can go. So yeah, who knows when I'll stop.
Can you practice? Can you practice mental toughness? Can you train your brain to reach that stage? Is there any sort of psychological exercises you do?
So there's not any psychological exercises I do. I would say one of the main things though is getting through those long, tough runs and getting through those sessions, because sometimes I get sent a session from my coach and I think there's no way I can run that. And then you run it and you build your confidence, and that makes you mentally a little bit stronger. So I think that helps. And I also, over time, have just developed tricks. So, for example, if it's getting really tough, I count to 100, because actually 100 takes you quite far. It's a good couple of minutes of running, and then that's a couple of minutes over. And park run is 5K. So whenever I have, which is roughly just over 3 miles. So if there's 3 miles left of a marathon, I always tell myself, it's just a park run. And for me, in my head, a park run is really short. So it's just playing tricks on your brain, really.
No, because I completely agree with you, Armana. I think one of the things that I used to do as well would be, well, when I used to run in Gibraltar especially, I like have the landmarks and say, okay, you're almost close to like, even though I won't stop at McDonald's, but I'd say, okay, you're close to McDonald's, then you're close to the next restaurant, and then you're home.
Yeah. It's just breaking things down.
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm really interested in sports psychology, especially because to be a great athlete, or even just forget athlete, just generally in life, if you want to be and play any part in society, even if you want to be a great accountant, you have to.
I do.
I'm sure you probably are. You're the greatest accountant in West London, Armana.
Thanks.
But it's all about the reason people get to that stage is because they've taken steps to have that mental toughness, and they've taken those steps to push themselves to the limit. Because Armana, I talk about this all the time, and maybe my listeners probably just fed up with me saying it, but we do live in a generation where we feel it's so easy to reach success, where someone can turn on the telly and watch yourself run a full marathon, be like 42 kilometers, yeah, I can do it in like a few weeks. But it's not that, like the effort you've put in, the years of work you've put in, that's what we don't see. And this is why
I definitely agree.
And this is why I talk about it a lot, because I'm like, people need to actually understand what people go through to get to your stage where you're aiming to run a marathon in 3 hours. I mean, that's just incredible. It's not easy, and I know it's not, because I know it would take me a good like 5 or 6 hours. Post-pregnancy, maybe like 8 hours.
It's the barriers that people face and the sacrifices people make. And I think we now live in a world of highlights. You go on Instagram or any form of social media and you just see the end result, and you don't see all of those sacrifices. And maybe I should, maybe I'm wrong for doing it, but I don't talk about that birthday party I missed, or those drinks that I had to miss, or the fact that I had to run from one thing to another, and I didn't have time to eat properly, so I ate on the go, or all of these different things that people don't see in your day-to-day life. But Instagram and these things are just the highlight, and you'll see, oh, she ran New York, or oh, she ran London. But actually, what do people do to get there? And what support do they have behind them? That also makes such a big difference.
You made a good point about sacrifice, Armana. And I think, I'll be very honest, I think throughout lockdown, I've actually become lazier. Because like I've got Netflix in front of me, I've got everything in front of me. And
you are also pregnant.
I am, I keep forgetting that. But I remember when I used to work, when I was working in the hospital, it was because I had a sort of prescription, say, okay, you're going to work at 9, you finish at 5. So I had a bit more structured routine. So I think I got more done at that time, but now I don't. And I've just become, I feel like I have become lazier. But when I was working, I was doing the podcast, I was doing everything else. The word you just mentioned, sacrifice, is so important because it's something that we're not willing to give so much anymore because we live in such a comfortable society. I myself, I remember when I was at uni, people would go out on Friday nights, Saturday nights, and I'd be like, actually, I have to wake up at 6 or 7 a.m. because I have a table tennis competition or anything like that. But people don't actually see that side because you actually have to go to bed early, Armana. You have to wake up in the morning. So what are the biggest sacrifices you think you've made over the last few years?
That's a really difficult question. I don't know what the biggest sacrifice is because I guess they are, at the end of the day, choices that I make. I choose to prioritize my running rather than going on a night out, for example. So for me, it's not a sacrifice because that's what I want to do. But I would say one of the hardest things with choosing to run, and I train, well, for New York, I was running 7 times a week. I had 1 rest day, 1 double run day, which leaves you, when you then add in work and you add in some gym sessions that you need to do, you have very little free time. And I think it's very hard for your friends that are non-runners to understand that, especially when I then add on the fact that I'm Instagramming and people will see that I've just made a post, but I haven't had time to go for coffee with them. And it can be difficult to explain to people. So I think, I wouldn't say it's a sacrifice, but I think that's one of the biggest hurdles.
Yeah, I think you made a good point there as well. Like, at what point is it a sacrifice? Because if you're doing it for yourself, if you're doing it for something you believe in, then really is it really a sacrifice? Because ultimately you're doing it for yourself. But I think one of the issues I find, Armana, is that, Will Smith has always said that, find the 5 people most close to you, and then those are the people who spur you on and get you going. And that's something I've always kept really close to my heart, because I feel like, my friends need to understand what I'm doing. They need to understand that I can't answer their calls all the time. I can't meet them on a weekend all the time. And if they understand that actually takes a burden off me, because it can actually become a burden where you just I have to answer this phone call now, and I have to meet them, I have to do this. But that's not what friendship should be about, right? It should be endless love, and it should just come from your heart when you can, when you wish. And I found that very difficult, Armana, especially over throughout university, even as a doctor, to find people who would understand me on that level and be like, actually, Meenal is very busy, or Meenal has this and this to do. I get it, Have you found that that difficulty as well? Because you have to put in a lot of mental energy into your running, into your work, into your role as an influencer. You only have very little left to give to other people, right?
Yeah, and I think I've massively struggled with that. Previously, if we were to rewind about 4 years ago, and you said to me, hey, do you want to record a podcast, or hey, do you want to go for coffee? I'd say, yeah, how about in 4 or 5 weeks? Because I generally wouldn't have any time between now and 4 or 5 weeks, because I was constantly back to back in myself. And actually that's not very healthy, because I think it's important to take some time out for yourself and just not to be in such a rush everywhere you go, so you can be a bit more present in the places that you do go. So a couple of years ago, I promised myself that I'd make more time for myself. And now I will say I'm busy on a Sunday afternoon, and yeah, I'm busy doing my own thing and making time for myself. And I don't have a problem doing that now. Whereas previously I would have had a problem doing that. And I find that often people can put a lot of pressure on you, and they don't mean to do it, but pressure to meet you or call you and things. And actually you just simply don't have time. And okay, I could maybe fit it in at 9 or 10 p.m. in the evening, but then I've just been non-stop since 6 a.m. So you do have to find a balance, and I think it can be hard, and I do think there can be too much pressure sometimes from your friends, and that can be difficult.
Yeah, no, I agree, Armand. And I think it's very difficult to find that balance, because I've always been like the yes man, yeah, I'll do it, yes, and it's only over the last few months really, well, not only with everything going on, but my pregnancy has been another addition to my life. And obviously, I'm sure when I have the baby, it will be even more work for me. So I've made it I'm trying to practice that discipline and say, actually, I don't have time today. If it's not urgent, let's try again another time. And I think friends who understand that, and I'm starting to value my friends more actually, because they come from a place of understanding, and I think that means more to me. I'd rather have 2 friends who get it,
yes,
than have
same.
who then have a bunch of friends who just don't understand what's going on. But Armana, I actually haven't realized that it's been almost 30 minutes and I still haven't got to my list of questions.
Go on.
No,
don't worry. We digress.
It's all right. I'm having such a great time talking to you. But I think one of the main questions I had, Armana, is that when I was started running in Gibraltar, I understand it's a smaller community. The population there is about 30,000, so it's like smaller than London itself.
That is small, yeah.
But it does have a very big South Asian community. Lots of people, especially from Mumbai and Pune, who've come to Gibraltar. Now, I remember when I was younger, my mom was it wasn't about my mom telling me to go run or to whatever. She was just like, wake up early, wake up on time, like just very traditional, wake up early and say your prayers and all that. Then I got to a point where I was like, if I'm waking up early, I might as well, do something with it. So I started running. My brother runs as well. And we started going to these small competitions. It started off with 10Ks, and then it went to half marathons and full marathons. And we realized that we were the only 2 brown people there. Despite living in a community where there are lots of brown people. And at that time, I think I was too young for it to click, for it to sort of give me an understanding of what's actually going on, that our representation isn't as big as maybe our Scandinavian counterparts or British counterparts. And now when I saw you, like especially on the front cover of a magazine, I felt so proud. I was like, this is amazing. If I saw you when I was 10 years old, it would have helped me so much, right? It would have given me so much of a boost to pursue my dream of running. How did you feel when you started? Did you go through the same thing I did? Because not everyone does. I mean, I asked you about if you had any issues as a runner, a South Asian woman. You're like, no, actually, it's been great. So I wanted to ask you what it's been like for you.
So that's so sweet of you, and I always hope that I will. If I could just inspire one other Asian woman to run, then that's amazing. So I guess when I was growing up, I came from a really sporty background. My dad was actually a professional hockey player for India. So he was really big into sports and I was really bad at sports. I wasn't making him very proud in that front. And then I did a school sports day one day and I won it by really quite far. And I think it shocked my parents as much as it shocked me. And from there, I joined a local athletics club. And I think I was really lucky growing up with my parents in that they were quite liberal. So I knew when I was, even from a young age, I knew that I was lucky to be encouraged into sports and into running, because I knew that a lot of other Asian women in my position, their parents wouldn't necessarily encourage them to do that. So I always knew that I was lucky and that my parents would take me 3 or 4 times a week to the local athletics club, go to my races and encourage me to run. But when I was at the local athletics club, when I was in my teens, there were really no other Asian girls there, or Asian boys, in fact. I remember there was one Asian girl and she was a really talented, I think it was a triple jump she was. And my mum would talk to her because obviously we kind of had the Asian thing in common. And she would always tell my mum how much her parents didn't approve of her going to the athletics club and spending her time doing that. And I remember my mum at the time used to always try and encourage her to come. And eventually she stopped coming because it wasn't encouraged. And from a young age, I think I was always aware that that was quite common and that I was lucky. Like I said, I mean, I've said it about 3 times now, how lucky I actually was. And so I knew I was the minority and I knew I was lucky. And I think it's really difficult when you look around in a sport and actually there's no one else like you and no one really to have as a role model. And now I hope that I can use my platform to, okay, I'm not an elite athlete, but I would hope that it could encourage other Asian women to run, because I think it's something that's quite difficult to do, for example, in India, to actually, as a female, to run. Or
when I used to go to India on my holidays, I'd be like, I'm going for a run. They're like, what? you're gonna get attacked on the road.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many issues with it, which is why you don't have any Indian marathon runners or athletes as role models. Because if you just think of it from a practical point of view, if you're a woman growing up in India, firstly, you have the pressures of family and children, and that is seen as a priority. So actually making time for yourself is not something that's so widely encouraged over there. You then think about, okay, so here I would go out onto the streets and run, but there, the streets are really crazy busy. So is it safe from a practical point of view? Probably not. So then, okay, can you take your running inside? Well, no, actually, there's not that many gyms, and the gyms that there are really expensive. So you cut out such a large amount of the population because it's just not an accessible sport. And I think there's more being done in India now to make it more accessible. I see that there's a lot of Asian women only run groups and races and places reserved in races for women. So I do think it's getting better, and hopefully that will help the sport and help the women. But definitely growing up, it was very, very noticeable that there were no other Asian girls or women in the sport. And I think even now, when you go to a race, there might be a few Asian girls, but there's really not many even now.
No, I think it's quite interesting, Armana, because I've always seen running as something that requires the least amount of resources, like just go out and run. And we have that privilege to do that here in the UK. A lot of people, as you mentioned, in India, actually now that you actually said it out loud, I actually realize that they don't have the privileges we have. I mean, even if they try to get to an athletics track, they may have to drive 40 minutes or an hour. It might be too far away for them. So I'm really hoping that in a country like India, where we can produce a lot of good athletes, and this is a conversation I've always had with my parents for such a long time, that the population is so big, but I don't see people of my color, of our skin color, on an international level so much, like football, basketball, and all these things, despite having such a big population. But I think we have to understand that the system is quite different there, and we have to empathize in that way. And I think there's a lot of good things happening down there, and change doesn't happen in one day. It will take years to manifest.
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of obstacles in countries like India for women to run, and actually for women in general. If you think about how a woman is perceived in India, really has come a long way. And hopefully, like you say, the change will take time, and hopefully with more time, we can see more and more progress. And we're definitely seeing it. But if you then think about Asian women who live in Europe or the UK, for example, they still face obstacles because culturally, it's not always something that people agree with. I run in my shorts and my t-shirt, or when it's really hot, even my crop top. And I'm fortunate enough that my parents have no issue with that. My brother has no issue with that. My friends and family have no issue with that. But there's a lot of Asian households which would not deem that appropriate. And you then have that obstacle, because as an Asian woman, do you really want to be running in a long sleeve top and long leggings in 30-degree heat in the summer in the UK? Probably not. So I think there's that obstacle. And then there's also the obstacle of, in more traditional households, like I said, there is this pressure on the women and the pressure and responsibilities around family and children. And I've had a few women that have messaged me on Instagram that have said, one woman a couple of weeks ago said, oh, I'm living with my in-laws, like I really love running and I'm trying to keep up my running, but they don't really see the benefit of it, but I'm really persevering at it, and I hope that I can continue to run. So I think there are obstacles for Asian women, both living still in Asia and also living in other parts of the world.
Yeah, and I think seeing people like yourself on a high platform as well is very empowering, Armana. I really just want to say thank you for everything you do for our community. Really, it's a great boost. And as I said, if I had you at the age of 10, I mean, it would have been even more helpful. But I think the main thing is, Armana, just looking at what's happening around in the world right now, we've seen a, a big part of society come to its true form. We've seen racism, we've seen our political system, and one of the main things that I've learned from all of this, Armana, is that to make a change, you have to have conversation. Whether it's about racism or whether it's about running, I think it's really important for these women who message you and say, I'm living with in-laws or parents who don't agree, sit down with them and ask them, like, what's the issue? I remember, Armana, I wasn't allowed to wear a sleeveless top.
So in my
in my athletics club, when they gave me my kit, I had to wear a t-shirt and
underneath.
and then wear my vest on top because my mom. But now it's fine. Now I can wear a vest; it's not an issue. But it's taken years
to get
conversation for me to get to that point.
Yeah, and I think it's really challenging, and I think it's really nice when I do have other Asian women that message me and share their problems because, okay, I don't personally have those restrictions from my family, but I'm aware of that community and I have that awareness to talk to them. And I think last year I was on the cover of Women's Running, and I personally think it's really cool that actually they did put an Asian woman on the front cover because when you go to a newsagent or a magazine shop or you go into your local supermarket and you go to the magazine sections, I mean, realistically, how often do you see an Asian woman on the front of any magazine, let alone an athletics sporty magazine? It's so rare. And I think that's actually such a shame. And we are so underrepresented that it does wind me up a bit. So I feel really proud that I was able to be on the cover of a magazine, and actually hopefully other Asian women think, yeah, I can do that too, because there's no reason why being an Asian woman should stop you doing any of those things.
Mm-hmm. So Armana, what would you say to anybody who wants to start running or feels too afraid to start, whether they're South Asian or anybody generally? What piece of advice would you give them?
I would say you need to be determined and just do it and work out what your obstacles are and how you can overcome them. So if the obstacle is your family don't want you running down the street, okay, can you join a gym and run in a gym? Or can you get a treadmill at home and run at home? Or can you run with other Asian women, maybe your sister or sister-in-law or something, and just find ways to overcome these obstacles, because nothing is impossible. So if there's an obstacle, we can overcome it.
Armana, after talking to you, I want to go for a run now, but I can't.
Well, be careful, you're pregnant. Maybe ask your pregnancy.
So thank you so much for joining me, Armana. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel empowered as well. And it's a nice sort of breath of fresh air to have this positive injection, actually, with all that's going on in the world. I think I really needed that today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, no, and thank you for having me and letting me share a bit of my story.
And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Meenal's World. As I said, there's a lot going on, a lot happening around the world, but I'm trying to get my head around it, and I'm trying to figure out how to use my platform to help everybody who's tuning in. And I'd really love to have your feedback on what you want to talk about, what you want to learn, because this is as much as a learning process for me as it is for you. And if you give me a topic, I'll be more than happy to read up on it, because it gives me an opportunity to learn something new. So you can email me. My email address is meenalsworldpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram as well at meenals_world. And I'm also on Twitter as well at meenalsworld. And you'll be able to see there's a bit of a difference between my Twitter and my Instagram. I feel like Instagram is more of a flowery social place where we post nice things and it's not so political, but my Twitter account can get quite riley and I can get quite feisty on there. So do follow me on all these social media platforms as well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And thank you for tuning in for another week, and thank you for being patient with me as well. I'll see you all next week, and I hope you're all safe and healthy.